want to acknowledge and respect the Lekwungen speaking peoples of the traditional territories where we learn and grow together. And to the Songhees, Esquimalt, and Saanich peoples whose historical relationships with the land continue today. Thank you. So to get started, I want to have some fun with this today, and I know this is a really serious topic, but this is a process where whenever I do my workshops or my talks or whatever it is, that the power's in the dialogue. And so what we want to do is we want to expand our dialogue a little bit today. And so we certainly have some people sitting together that know each other, but we do want to spend a little bit of time getting to know others as well. And so I'm just going to do a little exercise here with everyone so that we can spend some time and get to know everyone. So I'm just going to ask you to start with, just stand up. And I'm going to ask you to think internally a little bit, because this is a big part of today, is to look at ourselves. And so what I want you to do is I want you to think of 3 things that you're grateful for. And just take a moment or so and think of, what are 3 things that I'm grateful for? Okay, does everyone have 3 things? All right, so now what I want you to do is I want you to go and find 4 people that you don't work with and tell them what you're grateful for. So just go around, mingle the room, talk to 4 people and tell them what you're grateful for. All right, thank you. Just take a look around the room and see and feel the energy. And the power's in the dialogue. We can't even get some people away from their dialogue. It's awesome. All right, let's come on back to our tables. So I'm just going to reiterate the powers in the dialogue, and if you hear the dialogue, you hear the energy in the room, go up with that. And as we share the things that we're grateful for and as we connect with people, there's just so much power in that dialogue, and there's so much to share. And I've asked you to step outside your comfort zone and talk about yourself a little bit. And that can be really challenging, and I just want to congratulate all of you, and I'm grateful to all of you for having done that. My name is Stephen Twinestra. I am a professional speaker. I facilitate workshops. I do some coaching. I utilize a values-based leadership model in my teachings and in what I share. And 2 years ago, or 2.5 years ago now, I got a government grant to go to Royal Roads University and get a graduate certificate in values-based leadership. And while reading the outline sounded really cool to me, I didn't exactly know what I was getting into. But when I got into the values-based leadership program and started to recognize what it meant and what was going to happen for me, it was really powerful and really exciting. And I've decided that I want to share that experience with as many people as I possibly can. And so a lot of people ask me, like, what is values-based leadership? And values-based leadership is a leadership model where you identify and define your own personal values, and then you start to ensure that your actions and behaviors are aligned with those values. Because what happens when you do that is you'll get more engaged, you'll have more fulfillment with what you're doing. And so one of the things that I'm going to challenge us to do today is to have an awareness of what are our personal values, but also what are our collective values within a workplace. Because obviously today is about a workplace that we're talking about, not that it's, you know, it can be within teams, it can be within groups that don't have to be workplaces where we talk about bullying and those sorts of things. But I really want us to know and recognize that, you know, we have our own personal values and we have our collective values as groups together. And so one of the questions then is going to be, well, what are values, right? So does anyone have, how would you define values? Anyone?
Our belief system.
Our belief system, yeah, for sure.
The rules we live by?
The rules we live by, for sure. I heard someone here.
You just said what's important.
What's important to you? Absolutely. Yeah, anyone else?
Guiding principles?
Your guiding principles, yeah, absolutely. All of those definitions together, like, what does it mean to you? It's all the same. And for me, values are your deeply held beliefs that bring action to everything you do in your life. And so sometimes your values are conscious and sometimes they're not. So that's what we want to do today, is we want to talk about values and what are the values that you have and how does that impact this important Pink Shirt Day issue that we're talking about. So I want to thank all of you for taking part in that activity and stepping outside of your comfort zone and looking at yourself, because that can be really challenging to do. And so again, we're going to try and do that today, is we're going to look internally a little bit and see what is our role, what is our impact on the workplace culture that we have, and how we're going to do that. So how does that make you feel? We're going to look at ourselves, right? That can be somewhat uncomfortable, right? To start to say this isn't somebody else's issue. Now we're going to look at what's my issue with this. And I'm not saying we're going to point the blame at anyone in the room. I'm going to say, what is my responsibility with this issue? And I feel really passionate about the bullying, intimidation, and isolation as an issue, but I'm also really passionate about mental health in the workplace. And I think it's really important that we see those two issues as being very strongly connected to each other. And we're going to try and do that today. Okay? And so the next thing that I want us to do is just give yourself a little bit of room. And what I want you to do is bring your hands out in front of you and bring your hands together and cross your fingers. Okay? And I want you to take a look and notice which thumb is on top. Okay? How many have the right thumb on top? Okay, those with the right thumb are known to be the smartest people in the room. Okay? How many have the left? Okay, those the left are the best looking people in the room. And does anyone have both on top together? They're the smart people that know they are the best looking in the room. I want you to know there are no studies whatsoever that prove those points. I completely made that point up, and so that's not true. But what I want you to do now, again, is put your hands in front of you and bring your hands back together again. Is there anyone in the room who has a different finger on top than they had the first time? No. Okay. Okay, so now bring your hands apart again. Shake them out. Now, you're purposely going to change your fingers so that you're crossing in the opposite way, and not just switching your thumbs, but switching your fingers as well. Okay, and how does that feel? Very awkward, very uncomfortable, right? Now, what would make this not feel as uncomfortable? Switching back, but that's not what we want to do. We want to stay in this uncomfortable place. What would make it feel less uncomfortable? Practice, right? A little bit of time. Okay? And so I'm asking you to step outside your comfort zone a little bit today for 30 to 45 minutes. Step outside of what might be comfortable for us so that we can, again, look internally and look at ourselves and look at how we're going to do that. Okay? Does anyone have any questions on that? Okay. Is anyone against being uncomfortable? Great. Awesome. So there's a couple principles that we've talked about here now. Okay. The first one is the attitude of gratitude. Okay. So gratitude raises the energy in the room. Lots of smiles, lots of conversation. You know, voices got a little louder, shows that people were getting excited and happy to share what they're grateful for, right? And so I want us to keep that open mind and remember what we're grateful for and why we're here throughout what we're doing today. That attitude of gratitude will help us to look at what we're doing today and feel good about what we're doing and make meaningful change with that. And the second principle that we just talked about was, despite the fear, we're going to act. Okay, so despite the fear, we're going to act. We're going to get into that place that's a little bit uncomfortable, and that's okay. All right, that's okay. So what are we going to accomplish today? Well, what I want to accomplish today is I want to discuss the impact leadership has on an organization's culture. Okay, culture is it's an important subject for us in how we look at what is the culture of our organization. And it's really challenging to measure a culture. It's challenging to define a culture. If I was to say, what is the culture of your organization? It's, and that's okay, right? But as we become more aware of our culture, as we spend some time and look at our culture and we talk to people about our culture, we can start to look and find out what that is. And so we're going to create some awareness today about our responsibility to end bullying, intimidation, and isolation in the workplace. And that's what Pink Shirt Day for me is about, is to do that. And so we talked about what our values, right? Values are your deeply held beliefs that bring action and meaning to the things that you do every day. It's important to know that your values can evolve. Your values will change over time, and that things that were important to you in your 20s might not be as important to you in your 30s. But it's also important to know that what was important to you today may not be tomorrow. That your values can change based on circumstances or things that are happening around you. And there's a few specific areas that will impact that. And that's a big piece of what we're going to talk about today. And so how do we create that environment? How do we create the circumstances where people's values can be about giving to the common good as opposed to looking at addressing our self-interest and what it is that we want to do? And so we want to move our values, we want to move our culture from the subconscious to the conscious. And so consciousness is when you start to become aware of what's happening around you. It's about having an awareness of how you feel about that and why you feel that way. And so as we start to put some words to some of these things, as we start to embed our values into our culture, we're going to start to become aware of, well, this is a thing that's happening. I didn't know it was happening before. Even though I saw it in front of me, I didn't recognize what it was or what that impact was. And so perhaps after today, we can have a little bit more awareness of what impact that might have on ourselves or another person. So I'm hoping that within your leadership practice today, you'll notice your leadership practice or that of your supervisor or a coworker or someone, a staff member that works with you, can start to be, oh, this is maybe where they're coming from, or this is how they're feeling, or this is how we can support them. So hopefully we'll come up with some real good aha moments today. Now, a lot of people, well, some people here might be looking and saying, what have I gotten myself into? Anyone feel that way? Anyone want to admit to that? Totally okay. You may not, some of the things I say today may not be true in your workplace. Right? Some of the things that you hear today you may not believe to be true, and that's okay. And what I'm going to ask is for the next 30 minutes or so, is I'm going to ask you to act as if it's true. Okay? And that's okay. When you leave, if you don't believe, that's okay. This is about bringing an awareness to something, and it might be a week from now or a month from now that you're like, oh, I finally get what that point was. So that's the third principle that I ask as we have our conversations today, is act as if. So an attitude of gratitude first. Despite the fear, act, and act as if I know what I'm talking about. All right, thank you. So we're gonna do some group work here for a few minutes, and we're gonna talk about your culture a little bit. So what I'm gonna ask you to do, I'm gonna ask a question, and each table can work on this together. So in this scenario, you are a supervisor, and one of your staff members that you're the supervisor of has come to you with a complaint about a coworker who's using intimidation to try and get you on their side against a policy that your management team has decided upon. Okay? So what I'm going to ask you to do is just spend some time and write down, what would your policy say should be your reaction? All right, so do you have a policy on bullying? Or what do you even think? What would be the proper way to respond to that? Okay. Does anyone have any questions on the scenario?
So,
Yeah.
sorry, go ahead. So they're intimidating you to get you to work with them against
No.
the policy? Okay.
No, so you're the supervisor. I'm coming to you and saying, Kelly wants me to take her side, and she's trying to intimidate me to take her side.
Oh, okay.
Right? So you've written a policy with your management team. Kelly doesn't agree. So Kelly's trying to intimidate me to side with her. Okay, so what would either your policy say, or what do you in your leadership capacity, what do you think would be the right response to that? That's the second question. We'll get to that later. So please spend some time with your group. Again, it's a bit uncomfortable, it's a bit challenging, but that's okay. Okay?
You know what, just fake it.
Great work. Get the power in the dialogue. I always wonder how long will the dialogue last, and it's always great when I have to say, okay, let's leave it there. So now I'm going to ask you a second question. Okay, the first question was, what should you do, or what does your policy? how many people actually have a policy? And how many people actually know what's in the policy? About half? Okay, great. So what I'm going to ask you now is, I want you to actually step into your discomfort zone. And think about a time when this actually happened, where someone came to you with a complaint of bullying or intimidation, right? And compare it to what your policy or what you should do to what actually happened. Spend some time. What did you actually do? So please spend a few minutes. What did you actually do when that complaint came forward?
Yeah, I do have it. So,
Yeah, when I knew I didn't do anything.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Again, such powerful dialogue. So let me just ask everyone, how many feel comfortable that what you said you should do and what you did actually align? Okay, great. Awesome. Are you comfortable that what you did aligns with what you said you would do? Because that can be a challenge, right? And so why can that be a challenge? Well, Kelly might intimidate me too when I'm the boss. And so it's hard to confront that, right? We all, as leaders, we still face that. Well, that's a hard conversation to have, right? And why is that a challenge? Leaders should be able to deal with that. Why is that a challenge? Because we don't always train our leaders with those competencies, right? Leaders often will get promoted and put into those leadership roles because they're really good workers, but they don't always have that competency. And so we have to be specific in teaching people how to deal with those conflicts because it's really hard. And so I'll ask a couple questions and then I'm going to share an experience where I screwed up royally in this type of an issue. And so the question I'm going to ask everyone is, how many people spend a fair amount of time dealing with how are we going to help the person who was bullied? Hands? So the person that's come to you with a complaint, and there's the person who was the bully. How many spent a fair amount of time with the person that had the complaint to say, how are you feeling? Right? A lot of time with that? Great. Awesome. All right? It's such an important part of all of this is how are we supporting the person who has the concern or the complaint? And what are the actions that we're taking to ensure that we're supporting them? Right? How many people, and I heard it in a few places, how many people were going to have a meeting with the whole team to talk about it? Yeah. So I'm just going to share one of my experiences that I learned a lot from, not necessarily proud of. I screwed up for some. For others, they were very happy with what happened. But we had an issue where I could feel some discomfort with what was happening in our workplace. And as I talked to a few people, they were feeling like they were being isolated, that they weren't as important as other people in the room. They were being ignored, that they were being bullied. And so I, in my leadership capacity, is I need to fix this bullying. It is not okay. It is not going to happen. We're going to have a team meeting. So now I'm not addressing the bullies. I'm addressing the team. Right? I had everyone sit in a room and in a circle. And everyone had to share what was challenging for them. And the hope was that people were going to start to share that I'm feeling bullied, I'm feeling intimidated. Right? So what happened was the people in the room who were who were feeling bullied wouldn't speak up because the bullies were in the room and they didn't want to talk about it in front of them. The people in the room who were the bullies did a whole bunch of talking, absolutely. They had everything to say about how wrong I was, and this is dumb, and this is stupid, and why are we doing this? This isn't a problem, you're making it up. And then the other third of the people in the room were completely intimidated that I was putting them in a situation where they needed to share personal information that they did not want to share in front of everyone else. Right? So me as a leader, in trying to address bullying and give bullying a voice, put a lot of people in a situation where they were feeling extraordinarily intimidated and vulnerable and not wanting to go to a place, particularly because I didn't necessarily tell them beforehand that and give them the option to be there. right? It wasn't a mandatory meeting, but it was a meeting everyone thought we're going to go and fix some problems. Well, we were fixing the problem I wanted to fix in a way that helped me avoid conflict in any way I could, or at least to have the support of people around me. Now, what my thought process was I'm going to give people a forum where they can be heard. And what I asked everyone else in the room was, this is not an exercise in sharing, this is an exercise in listening. I want you to hear how people feel. But just because I gave those rules for engagement doesn't mean that's how they felt in that room. And so I, as a leader, have to take responsibility for creating an intimidating work environment in that moment, as well as for a period of time afterwards, because there were a few who spoke up. But how did they feel coming to work tomorrow? Right? Oh my God, I just outed my bully in front of everyone. And they continued to be intimidating to my supervisor and all of us at work and all at the same time. And so within our policies, we have to be very clear about how we're going to support that person who is bullied and how we're going to interject into what that is. Right? And so it's really important that the values we desire and the values we live, the culture we desire, the culture we live, are aligned with each other. And sometimes that means, as leaders, we need to step into a zone that's really uncomfortable so that we can support the people that are there, but also to change that culture of that intimidation that's there and the things that we do and how we have that impact on that. So here's a couple things that I just want to share, that as I was doing my research and as I talked to people, that how are we going to support that person who is bullied? And what are some common things that people hear? You need to have thicker skin, right? Show them some empathy. They're having a tough time, right? Just let it go. It's over, let it go, right? That's just the way they are. You have to accept that's that person's personality. You're being too sensitive. You need to have higher standards. These things happen in a workplace. And every one of those things is complete bullshit. Sorry for swearing, but I wanted the impact there. It's all crap, right? What we need to say to that person who has been bullied is, you're right to come to me, right? I'm sorry this happened to you. You don't deserve to be treated this way. Right? Nothing gives that person permission to treat you like that, right? How can I help you? And so it's really important to know that in all of these cases, they're individual, right? We can't deal with every bully in exactly the same way, because we need to find their motivation behind that bullying and how we're going to end them from having that behavior. And every person who's been bullied, intimidated, or isolated, which I'm going to get into in a minute here, also is an individual that has a different feeling and a different belief behind what they felt. You don't have to validate all of it, but you can validate their feelings. I'm sorry you feel this way. How can I help? Right? So you don't have to use all of these statements to say that they're right, and it depends on the circumstances. But if someone's feeling that way, then we want to move forward with that and let them know, not like, are you sure it's bullying?
Yeah.
Right? If they're coming to you, I mean, my experience is that people are coming to you. It could be that it's retribution for something they're just not happy about, and we need to find that answer for sure. But it also could be that it's really impacted them and they need someone to talk to, right? And so if it's just, well, that person's just a bully anyway, is a very different conversation than, can I talk to you? Like, I feel like I've been bullied and this is why. Okay, there's a piece of conversation and dialogue. So that's why it is individualized. And so absolutely, it's not just oh, poor you, but there is a process where the challenge, maybe even more so what I'm saying is, let's not right away challenge them and say, are you sure? And that's occurred. There's so many times, me as a leader, it's easier to say, maybe if you change, it won't happen anymore. When the point of it is it's that person that needs to change and not to put it on the bully, or the person who's been bullied. Because they're the ones who are going to suffer from that, right? And so we need to have that awareness of how do we support that person in whatever way that is, and that's individualized for sure. So, yeah.
I think the natural tendency is to, I shouldn't say natural, the tendency from cultural pressures is to try and kind of get through or get around the issue without really taking the time to listen and assess. And the statements you made around the person who had been bullied are symptoms of that. Because then we don't necessarily need to gather more information. We don't necessarily need to investigate further or take context into account or all that kind of stuff. It's just, you know, get a life, grow up, get a thicker skin, and then that takes us as leaders off the hook.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the dialogue is incredibly important. I think the other issue that we often run into is we say, well, we should have a dialogue about this, so we get the bully and the victim together and expect that to go well.
Yeah.
And it's like, that ain't gonna go well.
Yeah, very rarely that it will, for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
very rarely.
That's kind of our fallback,
Yeah.
because in my opinion, it's just easier for us to fall back. Wrong, but easier.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I did hear an interesting conversation here that is like, okay, you've been bullied and intimidated. Why don't I bring the bully and intimidator into the room and sit down and you can tell them how you feel, right?
Yeah.
You're putting them in an extraordinarily intimidating situation all over again. And one of my experiences with that is both sides then turn on the manager, right? They turn back. It's like, now I'm gonna side with you and it's gonna be all your fault. And you haven't actually produced anything. But one of the conversations that I heard back here is there's also a conversation about conflict resolution that may be part of the solution to that. But having to be very aware and that all sides know what's happening with that. Because one of the other challenges of that scenario is let's bring the bully and the bullied in and have a mediated session. Do both sides, are they very clear of what you're going into that session for? Right? So I've been accused of bullying, but I don't know that I've done that. I've been called into a meeting and I don't know why, and now I have to sit there and hear about all these horrible things that I did. And that's not easy for me either. I'm not saying it's about making it easy for the bully, but it is, you're putting someone in a very defensive situation that may not be as productive as you want to. So you have to have some very clear guidelines around conflict resolution. And I think, again, personally, looking at myself, that is a leadership competency I have not been taught. And nobody has told me I needed to learn it. Until now that I'm like, oh, I should probably learn some conflict resolution skills for things that are beyond the scope of what I'm already able to accomplish. That it's not just a single dialogue, it's about specific conflict resolution that I think is really important for me to have learned to be able to deal with some of these situations so that we can deal with that. And one of the things that happens that I learned through some conflict resolution training that I've done recently is that once you've had that label, now everyone's looking for all of the things that you do that confirm it. Right? So if I as a manager don't listen to the team when they have a suggestion, now they're looking for all the places where I don't listen. Right? If you've been labeled someone that bullies, now I'm looking for all the things that confirm what I'm seeing. If you're a person who has been labeled as they're a slacker that doesn't work very hard, now you're looking for all the things that. And what I've noticed is some people get labels and other people who do the exact same thing complain about them doing it. Right? 10 people in the room are doing the same thing that people don't like, but only one person because they're the one that's labeled. Anyway, that's a whole different conflict resolution conversation to have. But it is an important piece, I think, to know what does conflict resolution look like on top of how are we dealing with that. And so one of the challenges of this conversation is there's overt bullying that we all say, yeah, that's bullying. But there's some challenges. There's some subtleties within this bullying. And that's why I want to talk a little bit about intimidation and isolation as well. Because people aren't always trying to be a bully. They're doing things that create intimidation, or or just as important as isolation. So what is bullying? Right? So bullying is a repeated, malicious, health-endangering mistreatment of one person by one or more others. It's usually defined as acts of verbal comments that could mentally hurt or isolate a person in the workplace. And bullying usually involves repeated incidents or a pattern of behavior that will intimidate, offend, degrade, or humiliate a particular person or group of persons. I think it's really important, and I really want to make clear that I never use the word intentional in that. Because it's not always intentional, but it doesn't mean it's not true. Okay, so it might be part of a person's personality. It's our job as a leader, it's our responsibility as a leader to make that person aware how it is bullying behavior, and so that they're clear. Now, one of the things, it's what does a person know, or what should a reasonable person, what they ought to know? So you should know that's bullying behavior. You should know that this action, this behavior, is going to create an intimidation of another person. So you may not actually know it, but you should have known it, that that's part of this. But it's our responsibility to make sure people are aware. When you do this, you're intimidating others. You're not giving others a voice. You're isolating them. You're separating them from the group. When it comes to bullying, that overt bullying particularly, there's no power without an audience. And so those people want others to know what they're doing. They're proud of what they're doing in many cases. This is the overt bullying that's happening. So there's power in the audience. And so this is where we have a responsibility, not just as supervisors, but as people, that there's bystanders to bullying. And so if you witness bullying, you can play two roles. You can be helpful or you can be hurtful. And so the hurtful one is the person that doesn't say anything, that doesn't stop the behavior. The hurtful person is the one who joins in the behavior, right? Or shares the stories, or talks about the stories. They laugh, they make comments, they encourage the bully. Those are the hurtful ones. But there's the helpful ones, and that's who we want to be. As supervisors, as co-workers, we want to be the helpful bystanders. We want to be the person that steps up and says, I'm sorry, that is not okay. That joke is not funny. You can't say this about another person. You shouldn't be talking about this person behind their back. You can't make those comments to that person. It can be as simple as saying, cut it out, or that's enough. And studies have shown that a helpful bystander can end bullying within 10 seconds. Bullying behavior has started. A helpful bystander can stop it immediately because that power is taken away from the bully. And yes, they might try and turn it back on you, but it doesn't matter. That's not the point of it, right? If you want to end it, you want to support your coworker, you need to step in and you need to say that. It's really important that you know your role that we play within that, and that we have to step in and we have to do that. So our responsibility as leadership, and particularly within that area of intimidation, is the challenge is there's a lot of fear-based leadership that happens. And so again, I'm asking you, look at yourself. I'm not saying any of these things are you. Okay, but take a look, contemplate, think about this over the next few hours and the next few days, and think about where do some of these things perhaps fit in that you didn't know, right? It's okay to want to change these behaviors that we might have. And so let's take a look and see what that might be. Do we put everything in paper form so that we have a paper trail, so that we can use it as evidence? Right? Do we create forced learning and have several unnecessary rules and policies to follow? What is that about? I want you as a staff member to be just like me. I want you to learn what I know, and I want you to follow the policies that I've written. Right? That can have a level of silent intimidation on someone that you may not know and you may not recognize, but it can have an impact on another person where they're not able to have their own opinion, that they're not able to share. They don't feel that they have a safe place to be able to share their own opinions and to be able to think, sort of use their own experience. They need to do things exactly the way the supervisor has told them that they need to do it. That there's one-way conversations, right? Myself as a leader, as a coach, as a mentor, say you need to do it this way, and not saying, how would you do it? Tell me about it. How would you do it? One of the most impactful experiences of my life came when I was 20 years old. I was working as a student athletic therapist in a sports injury clinic with a soccer player. We're getting ready for national championships, and I took a very aggressive rehabilitation approach. And our clinic supervisor had to sign off on everything we did. And she read what I did and was like, oh my God, why are you doing this? Like, this is so aggressive. Why are you doing this? And I said, I'm doing it because of this, this, and this. She says, I don't agree with it, but I know where you're coming from. Go ahead and do it. She gave me that freedom to make my own choice in that way, knowing that I was going to either learn from the mistake, or I was going to find something really fun and really cool that was going to make an impact on a soccer player so that he could play in a national championship. Right? And so it was that, what do you think, how would you do it? And not, you need to do it my way and only my way. That has an impact on people being intimidated in that silent way and stepping back and not wanting to voice their opinion or share their own thoughts on that. They create the fearful leader is someone that creates excessive expectations of accountability. Who did this wrong? Whose fault is this? Right? Not why did it go wrong? How can we fix it for the future? It's who did this wrong? How do we make sure we tell that person, you were wrong? Why did you do this? Right? That intimidates people from making creative decisions. That intimidates people from trying something new. Right? We want to create that workplace culture. Doesn't mean you can do everything you want, that there's limits to it, of course. But we also don't want to create that workplace culture where every decision someone makes is, well, what would the boss do? And I'm going to do it that way. Right? Excessive punishments and punitive punishments. Right? Something minor's happened. It was a mistake. Right? In most cases, when a mistake has happened, the person working knows they made that mistake and they acknowledge it in their own way. We do not need to sit them down and say, you made this mistake, you did this wrong, and you did this wrong, and this is the impact. They know that. And so if it's always going to be like, well, as soon as I make a mistake, we're going to have to do something to make up for it, that creates a level of intimidation and changes the actions and behaviors that they're going to have. I used to work for a company, and I know a lot of people here, not everyone, but a lot of people work with people with developmental disabilities. And I used to work in an institution, and there were 14 children with autism, and they had a lot of behaviors. And the bus used to come in the morning to go to school, and we had to get 14 kids to the bus, dressed, boots on, coats on, whatever. This was in Calgary, so cold weather at the same time. And on one occasion, one of the clients somehow took their boot off and ended up on the bus without a boot. Right? It was chaos getting everyone on the bus. The person who was responsible for that knew what happened. They knew what they did wrong. The supervisor made them sit down as a team and make a weather wheel that showed if the weather is cold and snowy, they need to have boots on. Hey, these are adults, right? And if that person sees this video, I might not ever get any business from that, but that's okay, because she knows she gets mad at me whenever I bring this story up. But, the point of it was just, these are adults and someone made a mistake and they knew what the mistake was. Now, if the impact is great enough that you need to put something on a file, that's fine. But to punitively have to make a weather wheel, not with the client as a group of adults, it's just punitive. It's just, why would I ever step outside I'm going to do this and only this and nothing more? And I'm going to deflect responsibility for as much as I possibly can. And that's the workplace culture you're going to build when you do those sorts of things, where people will feel intimidated to the point where they will have inaction, right? So the bullies, so some leadership competencies that we looked at. So new leaders, where did they come from? New leaders have learned from leaders in the past that they will be more respected if they show control, right? So a new leader steps in and is like, I've been hired as the boss. I need to have control of this situation, and I'm going to punish you for that thing that you did because you're not following along. Right? Those aren't the leadership competencies we want. right? We want people getting into those leadership roles because they're good communicators with people, because they have empathy, because they're able to work with people and coach people so that they can move forward. And if they don't have that skill, then we need to teach them, right? These are competencies that if we're hiring, we need to know that we have so that we can support people and not put them in roles just so that they think they need to demonstrate control to show that they're doing a good job. Managers put in new positions before they are ready will increase their own self-esteem by flexing that power. Okay. They try to please their supervisors by showing their devotion to the rules and the structures, and they use punishment as a trophy. Now, this was when, as I'm doing my research and getting ready, trophy. Oh, what an interesting word. You know, ever go to a meeting with managers and there's a bunch of people sitting around talking about that really creative way they punished someone? Hey? Or how many people? Oh, we did 3 disciplinary meetings this week. I'm so proud. That's not something to be proud of, but it happens, right? It's a trophy. It's like, I did great. Look at how I did. But then when you succeed, you're also the trophy. Look at how great a job I did leading and coaching that person. That was me that got them to do that really great thing. No, they did it. You gave them some skills, you gave them competency. We don't need to use that as a trophy. The power that those leaders have becomes a replacement for self-esteem, right? They create an environment where people will not look outside the box. They will not be creative. They will not try new things, and they will not learn from those experiences. They're always thinking about, how can I do this in a way that will not get me in trouble? Now, one of the things we also need to, when you challenge the bully, how are they going to respond? That this is the part that can be challenging, because the last person responded this way, so it's hard for me to confront this one. Passive-aggressive behaviors. You called me out on something, now I'm only going to do minimal amounts of work. I'm not going to do the extras. I'm not going to tell you when something extra needs to be done. Right? I'm not going to be helpful. I see someone's making a mistake, not for me to take care of. They're just going to say I'm intimidating, whatever that may be. Or they're hyper vigilant, right? They are looking for every single person's mistake all the time. Well, I got in trouble for this, so that person needs to get in trouble for this, and this person needs to get in trouble for this, and this person needs to get in trouble for this. They overwhelm you with paperwork and administrative tasks, right? 5 work-safe forms because they tripped over a crack in the floor, right? So constantly giving, well, here's more paperwork here's how I'm punitively going to punish you back. I'm going to give you this, I'm going to give you that to do. They're going to ignore you. They could ignore you. And they can create an environment where you need to write a rule about everything. Well, there's no rule on this, so we need to have one. We need a rule on this. So, okie dokie. The culture that we aspire, respect, growth and mentorship, the culture that we live, fear, fixed mindset, and authority. Right? When we go there, when we have this culture that exists, this isn't the culture of bullying and intimidation that exists, that's what happens is you get into fear and anxiety and this fixed mindset of we're just going to do things this way. So that's why it's so important for us to take that leadership role, to identify those behaviors that are going on and see what impact we have on them so that we can move that forward. What is isolation? This is a place I really want to have some impact on today, because I think it's the part that gets lost really quickly. And again, some of the things that I'm going to share here was surprising to me. So isolation is the person who's not forming meaningful relationships at work, right? They're not contributing to the team. Now, I'm not saying this isn't a good worker, and I'm not saying they're not doing a good job, just they don't know how to interject ideas into the team, right? They just know how to do what they need to do, right? They don't feel comfortable in an environment where they have a voice, and they don't feel comfortable sharing. Right? They hold their cards close to their chest for fear of criticism. Right? Other people in the room are often judging. Therefore, I'm not going to give them anything to judge about me, so I'm not going to share. I'm going to hold my ideas close. I might share them in an email to one person or to my supervisor, but I'm starting to feel isolated from my team. I don't feel like I can contribute to my team. They're afraid to share their opinion. And why are people feeling isolated? So why are they feeling isolated? They don't fit into the group. Right? This is, I'm going to get into this a little bit more in just a minute, but it's so important to create that safe environment where you have one group and not several different groups. Right? But that doesn't mean we only hire the same kind of people, because that's dangerous as well. And I'll get into that a little bit more in just a second here. They don't want to challenge others for fear of retribution. They don't want to get up in a culture of gossip and one-upmanship. So they don't want to be the target of it. They don't want to be involved in it. So they isolate themselves. They sit at their desk at lunchtime. Has anyone seen the President's Choice commercial that was on during the Olympics? Where the girl, they showed her from a young age and going through all the different years, and she's eating with people and having fun at the dinner table. And then it's like, we used to eat together. And they show an office setting and everyone's at their desk and on their computers and eating their lunch there. Right? Those are people that are isolated. Some have chosen to be isolated because they need their time away or they want whatever, but some feel intimidated, and so they've isolated themselves because they don't want to be part of the culture that exists, and they're probably not going to stay. Right? They don't. So this is an area for us as leaders to look at, is we give the decision-making powers to one person or to a small group of people, right? So this is a conversation I want to have about a staff meeting. You go into a staff meeting with 20 people, how many people spend a significant amount of time talking? 3 or 4 have something to say about everything, and they'll tell you when you're wrong when you say something. Right? Those are the people that are isolated, that don't step up in a meeting and share an opinion. Because what's the point? It's just going to get shot down. Not by my leader, but by another person that's in the room. And the leader is, oh, look at that person. They really want to help out. They have so much to offer. But you have to recognize that those other, however many people, aren't offering anything. But you've hired them because they're great people. They have great thoughts, they have great ideas, but we're not giving them a forum for that. So let's be really aware of our staff meetings and what we're doing and how we're creating an environment so that people can give and so that people can have that forum to give their opinions on things. And so that may be, we don't have staff meetings in that way, right? We find ways to do it in a different way. And I don't know what that answer is to that. I'm still trying to figure that out myself. Right? Because everyone wants to have meetings and everyone wants to get things off their chest, but it's like, does anyone have any agenda items? No. Does anyone have an opinion on what we should do? No. So we got 2.5 hours left to talk about why are 4 people vacuuming and nobody else is. The chores, right? We only need to have a staff meeting to talk about chores. It's not about client care. Right? It's about chores. That seems to be the key topic anyway, right? It's why aren't you doing this? Right? Everyone goes into a meeting hoping someone else will change. So how can we recreate those meetings to come up with solutions that we want to do? So again, there's a leadership competency of what are we going to do? How are we going to go out and create that situation and create that environment where we can give everyone that opportunity to come up with some meaningful conversations within that. So people have been told to check their baggage at the door. Biggest frustration in the world. I've been so many places where they say, you need to check your baggage at the door, but how are we actually supporting someone who's having a crisis or having a problem or having a challenge if the only thing we tell them is check your baggage at the door? Now, I'm not saying someone who is in a really bad place, you can't pull them and say, how do we do something different? But if you just say, check your bag, stop showing your emotions, right? Stop being so emotional. Just check your baggage. Like, I don't want to hear it. Just do your job. Well, that's not supporting a person, right? That's not saying, how can I help you? That's saying, I don't want to hear your problems. Just do your job, right? I don't care what's going on for you. And is there times you have to do that? Well, there might be a way to do that. But it's still going to put someone in a place where they're going to feel very isolated. And so if we specifically talk about people in a mental health crisis who are told, we don't want to hear your problems, right? But then they're talked about when they don't come to work, or they're talked about when they make a mistake on something because mentally they're just not into being there today, or they're having a hard time with something, or decision making is hard. Or when they just walk by without saying hello, like they're so stuck on something, like this is an illness and we want to support them. So how can I help you? How can we embed empathy into our workplace culture where that person who's struggling, I can come and say, how can I help you? And if they're struggling to the point where it's impacting the people you support and the coworkers, well, then we need to find a method to support them where they're not there in that moment. Right? I'm not saying everyone who's in crisis has to be at work, right? But we need, as leaders, we need to go and find out and see what that is. And we don't need to wait until they approach us to say, I'm struggling. Right? You've had a great worker. They worked with you for 5 years, and for the 4.5 years, they were a model worker, and they were wonderful, they were awesome, and now they're struggling. You can write them up 6 times and let them go. Or you can say, hey, what's going on? Like, is something going on for you, and how can I help you? Right? And it's so important if we truly want to embed values of empathy and compassion into our workplace culture, we're going to have those conversations to say, how can I help you? As opposed to isolating them and saying, just hide everything that you have. Hide your emotions and all that you have within that. And I think it's so important in our workplace. And it really goes back to that conversation about what do we say to people who have been bullied, and tell them to have thicker skin, right? And tell them, well, that's just the way they are. Well, you're not really showing that person empathy to say, they're telling you that this really hurt me. And so we want to make sure that that is embedded into our culture, where we take the time to say what's going on for you. Other ways that people will feel isolated, and things that we as leaders or workplaces can create, is not being in the loop. And sometimes it's unintentional, and sometimes it is intentional, but people might work, and where I work, we have a number of people that work off-site, or they work at different sites. And so they may not get the memo of something that's really important. Sometimes it's a social thing. Oh, we're having a potluck. They show up, and they don't have anything, and everyone else is having fun in this potluck, and they feel, I'm totally out of the loop. I wish I knew. I would have brought my famous meatballs or something, right? And so how do we build those communication systems? And I sit every day right now thinking, how do I change our communication systems to keep all 40 staff and 37 families in the loop? How do I make sure I'm not emailing 3 managers to ensure one client stuff gets there? It's a whole other story. But so, how do we share and spread that information is certainly an important piece. Now, there's a couple things that I've experienced that I wanted to share, because I think these are things that we have to think about. And I'm not saying that there has to be a different answer, but when I first started working at a place, we used to have our Christmas parties, and they were a big, they're on a Friday night, and they cost a lot of money, and while the staff was paid for, their spouses had to pay if they wanted to go, and then booze was $7, and then people were sneaking in their own, and it was just a big drinking thing, right? And then we hired some staff who were recovering alcoholics, who couldn't come. Or we hired staff who had spouses and families, and they couldn't afford to pay for it. I mean, we work in community social services. Our staff don't make top dollar. They couldn't afford to pay $60 for their spouse to come to a Christmas party, so they came alone. Or they didn't come. Or they didn't want to pay for a cab ride home and to have their kids babysat before Christmas and all those sorts of things. So, we aspire to have family values, and we aspire to be a family together and share our time together. So what else can we do? So now we have a Sunday brunch, right? Staff come for free, their spouse comes for free, their kids all come. We have gifts for the kids, we have cookie decorating. Nobody has to pay for anything. It costs less for the agency. There's no stories about the drunk who fell down the stairs, right? Everyone's welcome and everyone can come. And that's the solution we found, whereas family values were important to us. The values we aspire, the culture we aspire was family values, but we had these expensive drunken events that most of the people couldn't come to. And we wanted to support them. We wanted everyone to be there. That was the point of it. So that was one of the changes we made. I bought food for people. Okay, today we're gonna buy pizza. Well, the 3 vegetarians didn't like the pepperoni. Right? The people who are gluten-free were like, well, thanks for buying us lunch, but I can't eat it. Right? Good intentions didn't work out that way. Did a Christmas party a few years ago. When I worked for another agency, did a Christmas party at our house. I had to cook nut-free, spinach-free, gluten-free, dairy-free.
What, you have water?
Well, what I did is I made sure we cooked things in separate pots, and we were able to have different things. But it was important for me to show each person that their needs were important. And again, I'm not telling anyone that's what they have to do, but think of that. What is that need of each individual person? Someone that might feel isolated from the group. How can we recognize that they might feel isolated and ensure that we do everything we possibly can to not have that? So one of the experiences we went through, and I know a number of people have also been through this training in different ways, but was a non-affirming workplace culture, and looking at the need for a person who's transgender and what are their needs in a workplace. And when we had Kingsley come in 2 years ago, it was just life-changing for me to recognize there was so much in this world I didn't know that people needed to feel safe. And if we're going to create a safe environment, that we have to hear people and give them we have to give them a safe space and the freedom to say, this is my need. And so 2 years ago on Pink Shirt Day, this is why Pink Shirt Day is such an important thing to me. It was a really important event for us where we sat down and we shared our CARF accreditation tells us to have a cultural diversity plan. Well, no, we have an equity and inclusion and diversity plan, because equity and inclusion is your means to become diverse. And so I created this an equity and inclusion statement, and it brought forward such depth of conversations where people were able to share the mental health challenges they were facing or someone they were helping, and it created a dialogue within our team for weeks, where one person actually went out and joined Toastmasters and wrote a speech and won an award talking about their speech about how they dealt with mental health. And that we could open those stories and let people know that you're not alone and it's okay. And a person came to me and said, you know, I'm transgender and I don't feel very safe here. And this is what we can do to make me feel safe. And it was like, oh, here I thought I was a person who was diverse, who understood, who was open-minded, who was able to provide for anyone, because I don't create an unsafe workplace. Like, it's, what do you need? But I hadn't created that environment where that person felt safe to share that yet, and that we need to be able to do that. And so it changed our world, where we started to look at, it's not just about how you label your bathrooms. It's about the language you use. It's about the terminology that gets used. But then it's also about, well, this is also a challenge that I have in this workplace where I don't feel safe, and just opening your mind and truly embedding empathy and compassion into your culture where people feel safe to share what they need to be able to feel safe. And I think it's just so important to sit back and spend some time and look at that and see what that is. And so this is an important point that I wanted to make with this isolation piece, is that research has shown that a staff member feels that ignoring or isolating someone else is more socially acceptable than being an overt bully, is less psychologically harmful, and is less likely to be prohibited by your employer. So I don't like that person, and I know I'm not allowed to be a jerk to them, so I'm going to ignore them. And people think that that's a better option. But the research actually shows that isolation has a higher impact on job dissatisfaction, the related health issues, physical and mental, and the increased probability of that person quitting. And so where does that come from? Well, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Physical and emotional safety and relationships are important, right? The 7 levels of organizational consciousness that I use in my values-based leadership work. Fix that. The first thing that you need to take care of is your physical and emotional safety, and second is meaningful relationships. And so we as leaders, first and foremost, when we bring people in, or when we start in a leadership role, or we look at our team and our team dynamics and what we're going to do different, we need to first make sure people feel safe, physically and emotionally safe, and secondly, that they have meaningful relationships. Because without those two, you're not going to have a level of self-esteem that helps people be good leaders, good coaches, good trainers, good staff members, creative, making decisions, those sorts of things. And so we need to have that culture where we can open the dialogue so that people can say, this is what I need to feel safer in this workplace. Right? There is a cycle that gets created. As you isolate a person, right? Higher levels of lack of safety, which they isolate themselves even more, and they move back, they move more distant, more distant, more distant. And then eventually they'll go. And one of my the things that hurt more than anything else for me is when that person who's been the target of a bully, that I worked really hard to try and create a culture and change the culture, but I wasn't capable, when they leave. That it's really sad that that person didn't feel safe enough to stay with us any longer, because we weren't able to change our culture, because they were isolated, they were labeled, they were made that person who was out of the loop. And that's really important for me. And so the leadership responsibility is that we need to be aware of people and characteristics that might create isolation. We need to recognize people's need to feel safe and build strong relationships in the workplace. A feeling of physical and emotional safety will increase their self-esteem, create meaningful engagement, and let them show their true colors and their greatest strengths. And the takeaway I want is that a culture that allows behaviors and policies and practices that create silos and isolation will directly impact a staff member's ability to learn, to grow, and to thrive. So how can we as leaders find a way to change that culture? And the last thing I want to share with you is some work done by a gentleman named Edgar Schein, because I think it's such an important piece of organizational culture and how we as leaders need to look at our responsibility within that. And so the primary mechanisms for impacting a culture for leaders is what are the things that you pay attention to, you measure and control, right? Do you tell someone, wow, you're a great staff member? Well, they're the ones that took 6 smoke breaks and hit up. Well, they might have did one great thing, but what is it you're paying attention to? What is it that's important to you, right? Another mechanism for impacting culture is how do you react to critical incidents? If a critical incident happens, are you looking to blame someone? Right? Are you looking to find the person that caused this? Are you looking to fire someone or discipline someone? Or are you looking to, how are we going to prevent this and make it better in the future? Right? Another mechanism is how leaders allocate resources. Right? Do we put money? Do we put time? Do we put effort into conflict resolution? Or do we just hope conflict will disappear because we ignore it? Right? Do we put resources into doing new things, bringing in people for training, being people to do something a little different, right? Or are we putting our money on a new desk for the boss? Maybe not a great example, but that's what that is. What is your deliberate role modeling and teaching, right? Are we truly being compassionate and empathetic to our team around us? Or are we showing people that we're talking behind other people's backs, judging people, those sorts of things, those are the things that people see as normal. People are looking to us as leaders and how we're going to respond and how we're going to do things. And we are creating that culture that exists within that. How do we allocate rewards and status, right? How do we, oh, great job, you've been here for 10 years, so here's a bonus. Well, they're not a very good worker. They cost a lot more money. They're never here, but great job, you've been here for 10 years, here's your bonus. Or there's the person that works their tail off, that gives everything they've got, but they're not getting anything. Now I get there's times to reward people for how long they've been there, but there's also time to reward people for the good job and the great things that they do. And so how do you do that? When do you take that time? And then lastly is how do leaders recruit, select, and promote staff? And what are the competencies you're looking for? And this is this is what I want to end with, is what are the competencies? What are the leadership competencies that will make you a strong leader that creates a values-driven work site? And I want you to spend some time over the next little while and think about that. And look internally and look at yourself. Feel uncomfortable. Switch your hands. Feel uncomfortable and look at yourself. And how do these pieces, how do these mechanisms of embedding culture, what role are you currently playing, or you or your management team? And take some time and look at that. And I will work with teams and leadership teams to talk through those processes of what are our values and how do we live our values, because they really are an important part of an organization's culture, and how do we live those values, and what are they, and do we know? And so I want you to go, leave here today and spend some time, and I can email these to everyone and show you what it is. I'd actually like to email you all my full speech so that you can see it all and have access to that, because I want to be a resource for all of you so that, you know, we don't just leave here and it's like, well, what did he say here? What did he say there? I've given everyone my card, my email address. Maybe drop me an email and just let me know, and I'll send you the information. So thank you so much for participating today. I appreciate it.